searching for something that ain't lost. Have we got our lines crossed? We're wasting time on stuff that doesn't really matter, while wishing for something better.
Hello my lovings, welcome back to another 5-inch channel. I'm Jay Books Corner. And today we are starting a brand new reading vlog. Today is Sunday. I'm very excited. I read 4 things today. Let's go ahead and jump into that. But first, if you've never been here before, these are the reading vlogs. I sit down, I talk to you, we have a good time. I read some things. Let's jump into those. Let's talk about my DNF of the day, which was Wish Me Luck Wish Me a Little Luck by Marissa Meyer. This is the second book in a duology, which I had no idea. This is on May 24 and 24, which is a list I curate of 24 most anticipated of the year, normally predicted as a 5-star. Sometimes works out, sometimes doesn't. This year has been more on the downer level than most, but that's okay. This was a DNF. I got 25% into it, 20% into it. Basically get the plot running and get to know the characters and the romance and everything else, and I just didn't care for it really, like, at all. I've had a hard time with YA novels in particular this year. There's nothing wrong with a YA novel. I like writing a YA novel. I have no problems with this genre or this sector of it's not a genre. I have nothing wrong with it. I just don't know how much I love a YA romance, because ultimately they end up falling flat for me because it doesn't have the same oomph as an adult romance. But I will have to say some adult romances, especially that I read this year, some in this list alone in this 24 and 24, have relied on more adult activities, what I will say, for the romance than the actual romance itself. Whereas YA, you kind of do get a full romance instead of the cushion, but you don't get the full romance, in my opinion. Like, you get almost about everything, but you don't get enough. And so I'm always left wanting a bit more. Like, I always want that adult sequel to these characters in the end, which was something that only happened with my adult life, which I guess would make sense. But either way, I could just be through a dry sprout. Who knows? This just wasn't for me. Let's move on. The next book I'm talking about is My Identical Daughter. This is by Noah. This is also another 24 and 24. I've just been trying to run through these, I guess. And this was a solid 3. This is about 2 men who are kind of like, they really like each other sexually. So like they're here for it. But like, it's interesting. It's an interesting little dynamic they have. And it's set in Regency, Victoria, England. The thing here with it is these people are outcasts. They are pretty well known for what they are, who they are as a person. They didn't give no shits. They went off and they did their own thing. We are following it through multiple people's eyes, several people that work on this carbon with them. We have our 2 main characters. One is a botanist. One is someone who is working directly with taxidermy. They both come up with the idea to, after they find this fungus that seems like it can bring life, they come up with the idea to make their own daughter out of this fungus and out of a dead corpse and things. It's a body horror novel, which I was not expecting. I would say it's more gothic horror also, which I'm not expecting. And I've learned in years, as I'm reading more and more horror, gothic horror is definitely on the lower end of things. I think it can be if it's done really well executed, and I can enjoy it. This one just wasn't my favorite. None of the characters stood out, and nothing really about the plot really sparked my interest either. That being said, I read Attack on Titans, volume number 16. I have watched the entire television show, so I'm very much aware of what the plot is and everything else like this. How do I explain it to you? I don't know. Let me try to pitch it to you. Attack on Titans, the first volume, or the first season, is about this world where Titans exist, and they come and attack this village, and you're following our main character, Aaron, Mikasa, and Armin, as they are trying to survive in this world. They end up joining the cadets, or the people who go out to kill these monsters, these titans, and then it just gets more and more insane from there. We are in a part of the novel where it truly, some people think it just goes a little off the rails, okay? And I'm kind of there too. This cover is super interesting because of that. Them having that, this being even featured anywhere near here, was insane to my brain. You watch the television show, you watch this. This could mean a bunch of different things, but me knowing what this actually probably means, crazy. Also explains a lot more. And this also gives a little bit more feedback to Levi's character. Alright, and then lastly, let's talk about Trust in Emerald Sea. This was the next book I picked up after Abundant Garden. Trust in Emerald Sea follows Tress as she lives this normal life in this island, and then the person she believes she's supposed to be with, which is like a prince, gets kidnapped, and she ends up going off to fight. It feels like a very weird version of Cinderella, was the vibe I get. She's cleaning a bunch, which is really interesting. She's like a peasant, and he's supposed to follow a princess, and like, I wouldn't be surprised if she ends up being a princess in the end. Brandon Sanderson's writing is phenomenal here, and the narrator is fucking amazing. It's like such a fun time. There's a whole sequence where she ends up on a boat, is all I'll say, because I don't know, it happens in the first like 30%. But she ends up on a boat, and the narrator's like, okay, let's get real here. There's like 40 men on this boat. Do you really want to know everybody's name? Do you really want to keep track of everybody's name? You don't get your notebook out and write down everybody? No, you don't. Okay, so let me just name everybody Doug. Most people are named Doug, okay? And here's my reasonings why. And I was like, this is perfect. This is exactly what I needed in my life. So there's a high chance this could be a 5 or somewhere near it. So I'm really excited to continue on with it. But yeah, that's my update. I'll update you guys tomorrow. Hello. Welcome back. Today is for Monday. I did finish Trust the Onward Sea today. I gave it a 3.75. It was a bit too slow for my own personal liking. I wish the plot had moved a bit quicker. Essentially, the first like 20% felt like I read like a whole novel, and then anywhere between 20% and like 60 or 70 or maybe even 80% felt like I was reading the same novel 5 times. So I landed on 3.75 because the narrator was super good. I also like Trust, and I didn't like the whole story. It just felt like it was a little repetitive, and maybe not repetitive is the right word, but it was a little, there was something off about it, I guess. So it wasn't my absolute favorite, but also wasn't my least. Hello! Today is Wednesday, but I'm covering Tuesday. Yeah, today's Wednesday, I think about that. So essentially yesterday, I read the entirety of Constant Cornfield. I moved away from Alexis Hall. Didn't even try it, so nothing against that book or anything like that. Just wasn't, I was in the mood for something else, so I chose something else. That's right, the answer is Constant Cornfield follows Quinn as she has her dad uproots their life and they move over to Kettle Springs, Missouri from it's like Pittsburgh or something, Pennsylvania. It's some city. It starts with a P. And they end up moving into this town. The town is known for their clown named Friendo, and it seems like there's some animosity between the older gentleman and the younger kids, teenagers, that type of stuff. And then people start getting murdered. Not dying. I don't want to put that out there because people murder, violent. This is a slasher. No other point around it. Slasher content. This. I loved it. It was a 5-star. This is my 3rd time reading it. I normally read it every Halloween. And the new one just came out not that long ago. I'd say maybe a little over a month ago, maybe a little less than a month ago. And I was pushing it off, and I mean, like, I was going to read all 3 for Halloween. I should be off this year, so we'll see. And I still plan on probably reading one of these, maybe. And also thinking, I might read Don't Fear the Reaper or something. I like a good slasher horror that I can count on Halloween to get me in the speed and get me in the movement and stuff. But I have this horror hound stuff I'm doing with my sister on Friday. I'm seeing a bunch of horror movies tomorrow as well. Are new, and I was just like, I really just want to be in the mindset of a Scream type situation or whatever going into this, because that's where we're going and we're gonna have a great time. I'm really excited about it, but I figured these novels are perfect, and so I picked up Constant Cornfield 2. I'm only like 6% into it or something like that. This one, however, the first one's more like the Scream. This one is the exploration of like a final girl, what that means after the fact. Like, you know how like a lot of horror movies and stuff, they tend to jump final girls because they don't want to deal with the consequences. It's the only one that really comes to mind that really tried to deal with the consequences of PTSD and things was Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, or Halloween in general, because like even like with Scream, and Sydney did come back, and there's elements of PTSD sure throughout those sequels. They never really tackle it like I would say they do for Laurie Strode in any iteration of her. Laurie Strode really went through shit, I guess. But here's the thing, Halloween's such an interesting like conversation in general, because I don't really know Laurie Strode. I mean, she went through shit. Okay, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, was it like, or was it the town? Not important, not to the point of the conversation. So I moved on to Clown 2, Frendo's Alive, I think is what this one's called. The 3rd one's called The Church of Frendo, which I've never read before, which we'll be reading this week, hopefully as well, fingers crossed. I hope to read all 3 of them this week to just kind of wrap them up in a single vlog. It'd be great. I'm very excited to continue and I love these characters. I just know I have some issues with the sequel, and I'm curious to see if I still feel the same way like I did. Also, when I read this 2 years ago, I wasn't doing a point system like I do now, so this might be like a 4.5 or a 4.25 and not 4, where I very much demanded it being earlier in my reading. We'll see. The evolution is. Also see how well the 3rd one is. I'll continue to read these, but first one's perfect. Also, my little strands. Just didn't realize they were down. Say hi. Visually, what would you rate it?
6.5.
Alright. He's gonna grab a chip and do a first taste test.
Okay.
if he can. It might not be possible. Okay, got some guac, cheese.
Pico de gallo.
Oh, pico de gallo.
What? Pico de what?
Got it.
Okay.
Initial flavor test.
Bunch of flavors. Just like just a regular thing of nachos. Like a 5 for me would be ballpark nachos. Or like if you go to like a high school game and get those type of nachos, that's a 5 for me. These is like a little bit above that.
It's like a 6?
6.5, yeah.
Okay, this is mine. I'm gonna give it on like presentation like a 7.
Okay.
This is his. And what are you? Oh, that's much better angle than the angle that I was looking at. What do you think?
I'll give it a good 8.
Okay.
Give it a good 8.
Today's final day for this vlog, so I'm gonna go ahead and close it out. I finished Cornfield 2, which is Friendo Lives. Friendo Lives ended up being a 4.5. I really enjoyed every aspect of the story much more than what I initially had originally remembered. I think my biggest issue is that this is a story that's told from a lot of different perspectives, and that was still true to what the original novel does, but not in a way. Normally when we jump to a different perspective outside of Quinn, it would be just simply the murders going on. This one had a lot more to say, a lot more to do, so I think it played a bigger factor here. I also think it's probably one of the more smarter ways to do an element like this. You have the next step forward, which is the third one. Church of Friendo takes place about a year after the events of the second one, which I did not know. I was kind of expecting somewhat of a bigger time jump. I also did not remember the ending, the epilogue, which is normally a clear indication of where the books are progressing. It seems to be. This one puts Quinn in an interesting position. We meet her in that position in a prologue. Quinn is very absent through the majority of this novel. It actually takes place with characters we have no idea we've never met before. Also, there is a romance element to this one that I did not particularly care for, is all I'll say. I won't say who it involves or anything like that, but I didn't really think the chemistry was there. Overall, I would say Church of Friendo was extremely disappointing. It is all about facing your demons, and it really truly is a conversation on what that means and what the extent of that means and the whole 9 yards. It's like to the highest extent. Also, if you're already dived into the darkness, how deep can you go before you're just sinking and you can no longer swim to the top? That is really where a lot of our characters' standpoint is. Also, it's a really interesting perspective on religion. I don't necessarily agree with the perspective that we are given here. I don't agree with it really like at all. But it's not the first time. I think taking the story, see, it's interesting. I landed on a 3.25 for Church of Friendo, which is a very big drastic difference if you look at a 5 to a 4.5 to a 3.25. I was hoping for a 4 at least, and I have a lot of reasons why that is not here, but they are spoilerly detailed. The screen's going to turn black and white as we talk spoilers, but I do want to talk spoilers somewhere. I think this is the best place to do it, and also a reflection on the whole series. It's just going to happen right now, so if you don't care about any of that, I'll see you guys on next time. Thank you for watching. Goodbye. That's the only thing I take that back. I have one other book to talk about, but it's a DNF, so you might not even care. You might just want to wait for the wrap up. Church of Friendo is an interesting experience and perspective for me, personally. For the simple fact, there's like one big reason, and that is several characters, in my opinion, are missing. The story itself doesn't take place in Kettle Corn or whatever the town's called. It doesn't even take place there. Friendo became a myth, a legend in a way. Arthur Hill became a myth, which is so interesting to me as a perspective wise, just because Arthur Hill as a character, there's such a lot that is done with the second book of making him be nothing, a movement of something, whereas this one makes him the movement. Also, I'm not gonna lie to you, and I don't know if this is because my last thought was for the second book, I was like, oh my god, it's like Scream 6 Samantha Carpenter vibes. This one went in the direction I would feel like a Samantha Carpenter would go in, to be fair, as a character, but also like I don't know if that also helped or like diminished my liking of the novel due to some of the elements being back into a Scream like franchise way ended up like hurting it, I guess. I don't know how to explain it. Also, the missing of Russ and Cole. I think the missing of both those characters in particular also ended up hindering the novel for me. I'm also not having Jerry in here. This is only because they're such huge stepping stepping points. I understand why they're not important here. We have a new character named Jason D, who ends up running around with Quinn throughout a lot of this. Quinn is in the process of hunting down a bunch of people. She has a list, and she's not murdering anybody. She's truly harming them and then leaving them to deal with the consequences of their sins. That sin being the massacre that happened all those years ago, or just like a year ago. And I can understand psyche-wise where she's at and why she's here. However, in my opinion, for a story that doesn't even take place, she was only in the town for 4 days before the massacre. Like during the massacre, she was there for like 2 days, and then the massacre happens, and then it becomes like a focal standpoint. But I also think like this book and this series really progressed the idea that a final girl is not necessarily a single entity and or person. It's normally like above and beyond. But the perspective here, the interesting thing being with the fact that like she ends up dying, for a final girl to die is also like a feat in itself in writing form. I just don't really know how much I loved it here. I don't know if I just didn't want Quinn to die. I don't know if this means it's the death of this franchise. I do think it could continue onwards. I don't really know if I want to see Friendo back, because I don't really know if there's any places that we can go, because this was mostly, I would say, halfly a rehash of the second book, just done on a bigger scope, because they're traveling and they end up in Pennsylvania or something like that, or Pittsburgh, or I think it's Pennsylvania. And this little town that's run by a cult leader is Friendo. Essentially, like, we follow this little girl. She's like 16 or 15 as she's going through a massacre, but in a different way. And then she ends up back in Kettle Springs. And there could be, or Kettle Corn, I can't remember what it's called, Kettle something. And it could be setting up for the fact that maybe she could become a Friendo, because I don't think she become a final girl. She never had a moment for me in a perspective of final girl or anything like that. But also, I feel like having Quinn die in the way Quinn dies, I don't know if I love. But also, it could be the conclusion that came to him to make it seem like this is the final chapter in this trilogy. And I'd be okay with there just being 3. In my opinion, I'll probably just continue to read the first one over and over again. I do think it is a perfect slasher in every way, and I loved it reading it this week. That being said, I also DNF'd the book. We'll quickly mention it here. That would be, what is it called? Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. I don't know if this is the first Alexis Hall I need to pick up. I really didn't like the writing, and I really didn't like the character that was presented. I think I got like 25% in, and I was like, I could read something else that's going to be more enjoyable for me to like. So I picked up a different book, which I'll talk about in the next vlog. That reason mentioned here. I'm only 12% in. But thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time.